So good evening, Rich. You were just finished phoning all your volunteers, getting people out to the polls. The polls have just closed. What are you thinking at this point in time, very early on election night?
I never ever call it in my mind, so I got to wait for the results. So, but we did get a good turnout of our ID vote. As long as our ID vote shows up and votes for me, we should do fairly well tonight. And that's always the objective: is you try to identify your vote going into the polls, and then get them out on election day.
Now, you were involved provincially in the campaign much more than you have been. You were the co-chair of the provincial campaign.
Yeah, I was actually the chair of the provincial campaign. Yeah.
And from the perspective, you know, what media look at lots of times is polls, because you don't see much else. The Liberals definitely closed the gap on the polls. What do you attribute that to in the campaign?
We ran a very good campaign to start with. The campaign was brilliantly run. I mean, the leader did a great job on the leader's tour and all that part of the campaign, and the campaign itself was structured very well. The advertising, I think everybody just did a good job, and so it was a very well-run campaign. And that part, plus our message, I think, where you talk about, you know, the future for people of British Columbia, I think we're the only ones who really had a vision for the future, and I think a lot of people started to look at us and say, you know what, these guys actually, and particularly the Premier, really do have a vision for the province of BC, and I think they started to shift their vote.
What is your feeling at this stage of the game? You've seen the provincial campaign, you've seen your local campaign.
You know, it's a horse race. Basically, it's I think it's tighter than most people think it is. But these type of races are always a challenge. They can swing on a few hundred votes in a few ridings and move quickly one direction or another. So I learned in 1991 when I was running a campaign for Dan Peterson for the Socreds, where I had identified all the vote and delivered it to the polls on election day, and what I did is I delivered Gary Farrell-Collins' vote to the polls on election day, because there was a wave that changed, you know, somewhere through the election the last few days after the debate, and the results were not what everybody predicted. So I learned a long time ago there's no such thing as a safe riding. That's why I run hard here, and I make sure people know that I'm running hard. They know that I don't take them for granted or the voter for granted, and we don't take that for granted across the province. So if we got our vote out and people stayed with us or moved towards us, we could win this thing tonight. And if they didn't, then we might lose it tonight. So I really think it's been an interesting little while over the next few hours to find out where this thing shakes down. But I think my gut tells me that it's tight, that it's going to be a tight election. If you get let's say 60% of the vote out, you're going to get 1.2 to 1.4 million votes out today. Well, whatever that number is, and you know, it could hinge on 50,000 votes. Yeah,
because there were a lot of ridings last time that were quite small numbers.
There's and the margin of victory is that way too, right? So you'll get ridings like, you know, Ralph Sultan on the North Shore will win with a huge margin, and then you'll get Jenny Kwan and Mount Pleasant will win with a huge margin. But in the middle, there's about 30 ridings that everybody refers to as swings that are held by either party at the time, and that's where elections are won and lost.